Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jason with Eduphoria. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today. We're actually going to be covering some stuff about testing differences depending on your roles and rights and so on. Our support team, we talk to our support team from time to time and get some common questions that come in. And one of our meetings we had a few weeks ago, they suggested we talk about this again, so that's why we're going to do it. So glad to have you on with us. I'm Jason, like I said, and Eloise is also on with us, going to be contributing a little bit and answering some questions. But before we get started, we're doing things a little bit different today. We always want you to answer questions or ask questions in the questions box, and that's still going to be the same thing. I think we actually have a slide that asks for that in a minute. But I'm going to give away a free hour of web training. So if you'll answer in the questions box to the riddle that's about to appear on the screen, first person to answer in the question box with the correct answer will receive a free hour of consulting, what we call a consulting hour, free hour web-based training from our training team, which you can use at your leisure for whatever purpose, for whatever application, and you can just contact, we'll let you know. Obviously, we'll have your name and email address, but we'll contact you and try to get that set up as soon as we can. And so here we go. Here's a little riddle for you on the screen. And so as you start thinking about an answer, if you'll type into the questions box what you believe that answer is. Oh, well, we got lots of people already know that one. All right, it's already answered by about 5 or 6 people. That wasn't as hard as I thought. I mean, people have heard that one before. Either that or their Google is fast. So we've got plenty of people already answered. Actually, David Holland was the first one. David, so we'll contact you. I know David, and so David
we'll reach out to you.
Was the first one, and we'll reach out to David and give him that free hour of training. Maybe we're going to try to do that. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the other things that we're going to be present at in the near future here in a little bit, but let's go ahead and move on with the webinar. Just like you answered there, some of you folks with the with the letter M. Any other question you have throughout the webinar, you can go ahead and ask them, and we'll kind of monitor. Eloise will kind of monitor those, and I'll stop every once in a while. This webinar shouldn't take very long, so we should have time for some questions. But please try to keep the questions on topic to what we're talking about today. I know there may be some other questions around, and we may get a chance to answer some of those, or at least try to at the end of the webinar. But for the sake of during the webinar, please keep them along with the topic that we're talking about. So what we're going to do later, we're going to talk about different assessment levels, whether it be a district level, campus level, teacher level, or team testing. There still is, from time to time, some confusion, kind of pitfalls you can hit there. We'll start with roles and rights, talking about how that impacts testing and who can test and who can copy and who can see and change keys and things like that. And then we'll talk a little bit about how that reflects on the data end, specifically talking more about team test on that one, because I think there's still some confusion with if you're using team test for like a campus assessment, whether or not you have to share or not share. And so we get those kinds of questions in, and so we'll address that. And then we'll talk a little bit about, from the teacher standpoint, making sure your teachers are aware of the test available button and how it's different. It's different than it's been in the past for many years, but it's been the same way for over a year now. And then we'll just kind of reiterate or go back over a little bit of performance levels, because it does relate to assessments. It's still fairly new. We still don't have every district out there using their own performance levels, defined performance levels. And so we'll just kind of reiterate that, kind of hopefully clear up some possible confusion, or even those of you out there that may not even know that those are out there still. So we'll try to just go over that again. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get out of my little presentation there and move back over into the management side on roles and rights, and speak specifically about roles and rights concerning test creation and administration. And so I'm using a teacher account. As you see, it's called Teacher. And those of you that manage roles and rights, typically a teacher that doesn't do anything else would not have any other roles and rights, but that would allow them to create their own teacher test. And we're, once again, main purpose of this webinar is to kind of differentiate between those different level tests. So to create a teacher test, there's no role or right needed. To create a team test, there is no role or right needed. Teachers have the ability to create those without any roles and rights. They have the ability to create and manage their own teams without roles and rights. And so we'll talk more about the testing in just a minute, but once again, it's focusing on kind of roles and rights, because I think a lot of times this causes some issues down the road. Because what we see, speaking just roles and rights in general, Eduphorians, the folks that are in charge of Eduphoria or your technology department, whoever assigns roles and rights, a lot of times, especially at the beginning of the school year or the beginning of the second semester or whatever trimester, like you guys are doing kind of right now this time of year, we see people that maybe get a change in their job. We hire new people get different positions, and we're always busy, and somebody calls or emails the help desk at our school district, or calls me directly, emails me directly, and says, hey, I need to be able to do this in Aware, and I can't. With our busy schedules, a lot of times what happens is something similar to this. So they just start checking little boxes, and then they'll email them back and say, hey, can you do it now? And if they can, great. If they can't, well, let's check a few more, and can you do it now? And a lot of times this is how it works. And once again, I'm not talking down to anybody if this is how you've done it. A lot of times we're busy with jobs that we do, and I've been there as well. Eloise can tell you she's been there as well back in the day. But obviously these are specifically guided for certain reasons. And what ends up happening, unfortunately, concerning test creation is if you check this checkbox for data administrator, that creates the district level test creation right, meaning they have all access to create and manage all tests in the district, whether they be district test and or campus test. And really concerning if you're using an item bank, which is where this rolls into too, it has access to see those items that are secured for the district. Now that may be by choice, and that's fine if it is. But unfortunately, if you give a person that needs campus access, so let's say I'm at a larger school district and we have some campus instructional coaches or whatever, and they're the ones that are in charge of building tests for, let's say, 3 middle schools. If I've in the past given this person data administrator, sometimes we get new administration, or sometimes in the summer we want to kind of audit our roles and rights and clean up things because things have been out of place, and we want to make sure things are clean. I'm like, well, this person's not a district level staff anymore. They really only need access to a few campuses, and so we put campus administrator, and when we go pick the 3 middle schools or whatever that this person is supposed to have, and looks like I only have 2 in my demo site, so we'll just say 2. That's all fine and dandy for going forward in the future. This person will be able to create and manage tests for those 2 campuses. However, because they had the district level access prior to this, any test that they created with this access is no longer visible to them, even themselves. They created them themselves, and they can no longer see it because their access has been diminished to a lower level of access. And so I want to always caution all of you out there to kind of understand what roles and rights do before we go and check those check boxes. And there's a lot of them in Aware. There's a lot of rights in Aware that correspond to certain roles. And I would say, if you ever have a question, if you get a new employee, or if you're in that cleanup action in the summer, please contact our training team, or especially training at eduphoria.net, and we can kind of advise you on the impacts of changing. I'm not saying don't change. I think it's good to keep your roles and rights as clean and as specific as possible, especially dealing with student data. But you do want to understand the impacts of things before they happen. Because if you do this without anybody knowing, then this person logs in to make a test, and they're going to copy a test that they did last semester or last year, and they go in and they can't even find it. And so Eduphoria deleted my test, and now let's call Eduphoria and gripe at them. But it's really just because it was a change in roles and rights that caused that issue. So data administrator, once again, is the district level. Essentially, if you were to check the little checkbox here of campus administrator, that's kind of the same thing. You have rights to create tests at all campuses. I will say that there's kind of a workaround to kind of still separate the data, 3 or 4 people at the district that have this access, but we still have people that need to build tests at every campus. Most of you out there probably have campuses that have been built in, like the service center or the administration office or whatever. If you uncheck any one campus, that actually limits that person. So they still may have all instructional campuses that they have access to build tests, but because they don't have every single one, then it still is a lower level than data administrator. That's kind of the workaround of, I only want like 3 people to have this, but I have 14 people that need to be building tests for the entire campus, the district, because I have a math coordinator for secondary, math coordinator for elementary, whatever. And so, I still want to be a different level than the testing office that's going to build these 2 benchmarks a year or whatever, and those are going to be secured, and then campus can do their own. So that's kind of a way to separate is if there's one campus that you've done in through managed schools, that's probably just like a fake campus or a different building. As long as it turns to a square here and not a checkbox, then that still differentiates between these 2 roles. If this is a checkbox, essentially for test creation purposes, they're the same. I'll pause for a second. I've kind of been watching the questions as we go. Any further roles and rights or any roles and rights questions concerning test administration? Okay, don't see it. So I'm going to start kind of at the base level of test creation, like at the teacher level, and then we'll move up, talking about how the data is done, how the test is created, and so on, and then we'll move up to team, then campus, then district. And so here we go. So I'm logged in now, switched over to like a teacher account, tried to be zoomed in here for you guys so y'all can see better. But on the assessments tab, if you have tests that are, you notice I just have school and district assessments because I've just given my teacher that access. So let me take that back before, and then refresh here. So here we go. So that's why I had those campus and district, because I had just given that access to that teacher. So typically this is what a teacher has access to without any role or right. They have access to their own teacher test and to team tests if there are any. And once again, if there are any, if there aren't any team tests, then this button, this spot is not going to be there because there aren't any tests to categorize in there. So I'll go back because I'm going to talk about the difference here in a minute. I'll go back and talk about signing the role and what that does and what that means. So we'll just stick to teacher for now. And so to create a teacher test, you see down here, you have this button that says create a new teacher test. There is not a button that says create a new team test. A team test is just a teacher test that has been shared to a current team that the teacher is a member of. That's why there's not a team test button. So we would just go through the process of creating a test. Now I've kind of already done one, just for the sake of time. Once you get through the wizard, then your test is here. The teacher has the availability to edit the test just like any other test creator. They can change the values of the performance levels, and we're going to go back and talk about performance levels here in a little bit. Just like any test creator they have. Now, granted, if you are experienced in district or campus tests, there's a different set of tabs here. Let me switch over so I can just differentiate that right quick for you. So you notice on an administrator, so this is the data administrator. This is actually a district test, but campus would be the same one. There are 6 tabs. And then for a teacher test, there's only 4 tabs. So the students tab is one of those that's removed, and the campus tab that's automatically removed because it automatically knows what campus that the teacher is a part of. And they don't have to assign it to any students because it's automatically assigned to this teacher's classes, and the teacher just chooses which class to give it to in the test available button, which we'll get to in just a little bit. So they can add questions and do anything else, just like any other test creator. They can search the item bank, assuming that they have access to an item bank. They automatically have access to their own item bank that they possibly have built. But whether if it's a third-party item bank that your district has purchased, that we can go into that in a second and talk about those access levels. Who can search and use those questions from the item bank. And so the teachers may or may not, depending on how you've set your access. And once again, we can follow up on that in a minute. You'll notice at the top, this is of a teacher test. There's 2 different share buttons. So this share button is sharing with other teachers. Well, sharing with any other person for that matter, typically meant for teachers, but in the past we could share this with an administrator and they would get the teacher test button. It's kind of really not necessary anymore because of teaming. But essentially, this button is to share the test with another teacher. So let me kind of address one question that's already come in along with sharing. So we got a question in that says, can the admin view the teacher test? So there's 2 different answers to that question. The test itself is the teachers as a teacher test. They're the only person, the only login that can see or edit or change this test. They're also the only login that can see the data that is recorded from this test. A teacher test. We're not talking about team test yet. Well, if it's a teacher test, it is only the teachers. The teacher's the only one that can administer it. The teacher's the only one that can edit the questions, edit the answers, change the key, change the question weight. And once the test is given, those students that are in my class as a teacher, I'm the only one that can see that data on the Analyze tab. That is what teacher tests are designed to do, and that's what they're for. If I want to give a quiz at the end of the week, and it's just for me, and I want to use a where to do it, I can do it. So let's say I was going to do that quiz at the end of the week, and let's say I'm teaching 5th grade math. Well, let's say there's 3 other 5th grade math teachers at my campus, or maybe there's one at a different campus, but we're friends. And I've built this test, and obviously it probably had more than 2 questions, but let's say it had 20 questions, and I've built this test. I'm going to do it for my own purposes, a quiz, but another teacher is going to use it too. So I could share this test with those other teachers, and you just search for a user by name, and you share it with them. Essentially, what you're doing is you're creating a copy of your test, and you're sending that copy to another person. So although they didn't have to recreate the test, it is a different test. It is essentially like having 2 different tests. It's one for me, one for that teacher, and when that teacher edits the test, they're not editing my copy. They have a different copy. They can change the answers, change the questions. It has no impact on my copy whatsoever. And when they give it to their students, I won't see the data for her test or his test, and she would not see the data or he would not see the data for my test. It is essentially like sharing a paper copy. So if I went to the copy machine and had a 4-page test and made a copy of it, and then I handed it to another teacher, they could cut and paste and tweak it all they want, and it wouldn't have any impact on my original copy. So that is essentially what we're talking about with the share button. Unlike the share button is share with team. So let's kind of switch over to team testing. But before I do that, any questions about strictly teacher testing? And we're gonna reiterate the data visibility of the test data here in a little bit, kind of talking on that side, and I'll switch over to the Analyze tab. But on the test administration side, anything? Okay. What would you use it for? That's a good question. So originally, if you think about, there's a vast difference in how Aware is used depending on the size of your district. If you're a smaller district, then teachers create their benchmark. I mean, they create everything. They create the tests that we're going to use for district tests a lot of times. And so, in that sense, teacher tests are probably less used, maybe not used at all, because the teachers are actually creating our curriculum-based assessments or whatever we're doing. But if you're let's switch over and say if you're a large district, 50 or more campuses, you got several thousand teachers. If teachers are using Aware to give their own assessments and maybe they're exporting some grades to a grade book or whatever, we intend that visibility of that data to not be available to administrators, because you could imagine the mass amount of tests that would be there, and just mix up everything. And so teacher tests are really used for quizzes, tests, stuff that teachers are going to do, because they can analyze the data on them just like you can any other test, but it's just for the teacher. So, all right. So team tests. So team tests, fairly new, only been around a couple years with Aware. And so the first requirement of a team test is, are you a member of a team? And so you can't share any teacher test unless you actually are a member of a team. And like I said earlier, teachers have the ability at the bottom of the Analyze tab and the bottom of the Assessments tab to create and edit teams. There only needs to be one team. So if I'm going to be on the 5th grade math team, the other 4 5th grade math teachers don't have to create a team themselves. Just one of us has to create a team, and then we can add members to that team. And so, once again, I've already done that. And so when you create a team, it goes through a little wizard, but then you add members to the team right here. And so you could add staff. It just gives you a little search box. You search for them, select them, and then you add them to the team. And so as long as you're a member of the team, you have equal access, and that's important to know. You have equal access to the team as any other team member. So even though I created the team as myself, I am not the team captain per se. Any member of the team could add members of the team. Any member of the team could remove members of the team. And these teams also, if you use forethought, they go back and forth. And so if you already have a team in forethought, then those teams would already be part of Aware. Just have to be a member of it. So you could create a team.
Jason,
Yes.
just real quick, I want to confirm. I have one person that's lost audio. I'm not too sure if anyone else has. I don't see anything else coming in.
And you can hear me correct?
Yes, I'll go ahead and respond.
So if you've lost audio, you're probably not hearing me say this. But those of you, if you ever lose audio, that's not uncommon sometimes with GoToWebinar. A lot of times, if you'll just switch over to the call or switch the audio type you're using and then switch back, sometimes that'll fix it. Hopefully that's not a global problem for everybody. All right, so we got a team created. We're a member of a team now. And so then back to my teacher test. If I wanted to share that test with the team, right? So then these are the 2 teams that I'm a member of. I pick the team that I want to share it with, and then test types. We can kind of go in and talk about test types, but there will be certain test types that have been created or managed at the district level that we've allowed to be used for team tests. And district benchmarks probably would not be one of them unless you're a smaller district, maybe. But you would pick the type that you want, and then you can convert that to a team test. Once you've converted, and this is kind of a question that came in, and we've kind of already seen it, but once you've converted this test to a team test, it is no longer my teacher test. It is a team test that cannot be converted back down to a teacher test. So best practice here. If I'm a teacher and I create this test, and I'm going to share it with the team, and then other members of the team can go in and add questions, tweak questions, and we can work as a team to administer this test, which is the whole purpose of this. But I want to keep my own copy of the original. Then before I share this to a team, I would probably go in and create another test, copy this original, so that I have an original copy as a teacher test, because once you share it, it's gone. It's no longer just yours. It's part of the whole team's test. So kind of a best practice there is always keep one copy as a teacher test if you do. However, another best practice thing here, and we'll kind of talk about this with tests available as well. make sure you name it something different so that you know that the copy is not the same one, because you could eventually choose the wrong one to administer. And if you choose a teacher test, then nobody else is going to be able to see the data. We want to make sure we choose the team. All right, so let's go over to my team test here that I kind of just put in a few minutes ago, and we can kind of just look at the differences here. So once again, we've added an administration tab, which was not there as part of a teacher test. We've also added a status. Teacher tests are automatically active. They are not in pending state, because as a teacher, if it's my test, I'm never going to give my own test prior to it being ready for me to give, because it's my own test. But now this is shared to other people as part of the team. I don't want anybody giving this test until whoever's in charge of creating it has already gone in and made all the questions and made all the changes we want. And so just like a campus or district test, a team test starts in the pending state and would have to be moved to the active state before anybody could administer the test. There is not a students tab, because unlike a campus or district test, this does not have to be assigned to students. It's assigned to every teacher that's a member of the team, and therefore they can choose which of their class to assign it to, just like a teacher test. So it is still a little bit more simple, per se, than a campus or district test, in that I don't have to assign it to a class. But the administration tab is the same a little bit. It's a shorter administration tab than it is for a campus and district test, because we do have a date range, because we have an active state, and more than one person is in charge of giving it. And unlike a teacher test, you could also upload results. So a little bit more, it's kind of in between a teacher test and a campus test on what you have to do. Any questions about that?
Jason,
yes.
there is a question on when a teacher creates a test and wants to share it with the team, do they have to create the test first or the new team first?
Okay, well, theoretically either or. So I could create like this teacher test. If I had already created this teacher test, even if I didn't add any questions to it, it could be one question or nothing. If I already created this test and I wasn't a member of the team already, I could go create a team right now and then share it. So you can do the test first if you forgot to do the team. Or obviously, if you're already a member of a team, then you can do the test after the fact and then share with the team. So you just have to be a member of a team in order to share it. That can happen at any time prior to sharing it to the team. And if it is going to be a team test and more than one person, more than you, are going to be in charge of contributing to the test, writing questions or whatever, then if somebody just has to start the test. So somebody has to start the test as a teacher test and then go in and share it with a team. And then once it's a team test, then everybody on the team can go in, add questions, whatever. Good question. All right, any other questions? Yeah, we have some best practices about naming any test. I don't care if it's district, campus, teacher, team. Those of you out there that are in charge of Eduphoria, in charge of Aware, a naming convention or a naming best practice, like differentiating between teacher and team because of the name, differentiating between this year and last year, whatever it is, the better you can name it and the more consistent you can name it across all of your users, the better you're going to be in copying, the better you're going to be in looking for data. So those of you that have kind of mentioned some best practices of what you do with names, you're absolutely correct. So if you can come up with a best practice policy for your users to say, this is what we're going to name it if it's a team test. That way when we look at it, we know it's a team. Vice versa compared to a teacher test, because we don't want to mix those up. Anything else? Eloise, I'm going to let you weed through those. We've got lots of comments and questions coming in, and I'm not going to take all the time to read through them. So, Eloise, go ahead and read through those, and if you need to pop in and ask me something, go ahead and do it. All right, I'm going to switch kind of up to campus. But before I do that, I'm going to really show you here, and this kind of goes back to a question we had earlier. This teacher doesn't have any other roles and rights, and so the only button for creating a test is create a new teacher test. Well, if they've been given access, and so let me go back to my teacher and the manage users. So if that teacher is given access to create a campus test, meaning the campus administrator role is the role. If you hover over it, it says manage campus assessments. So that's a pretty clear role on what that role does. So if I do that and click save, I've now assigned that role to that teacher. Let me go back over here and refresh my little page with this teacher. You'll now notice that they get the school and district assessments that are assigned to their campus, not all the others because they're only on one campus. But most importantly, what I'm talking about here is they get a button that says create a new test. So for those of you out there that have teachers that create campus and or district tests, as well as their own teacher test, I'm sure those of you that do that have definitely compared and contrasted these two creates. And so once again, the teacher test is only ever going to be a teacher test or a team test. It can't translate to a campus or district test. And this is never going to be a team test or a teacher test. It's going to only be a campus test in this case because this person only has campus access. Or if you had district access, it would only be that. And so the differentiation between school assessments and district assessments has nothing to do with a button. It has to do with who clicks that button. And so if I have the access level for a district test, so I have data administrator or I have all campuses checked on that role of campus administrator, then when I create a new test, it's going to be under district assessments. Even though it may only be for one campus, it's going to be labeled or it's going to be categorized under district because that's the access level I have. And once again, if they only have campus access, then it's going to put it there. And so the difference between campus and district is solely that. Who creates it determines where it goes. Now, obviously, when you create it, then you have to assign the students that are going to take it and so on. But that's the only thing that differentiates between district and campus is because of the access level of the person creating the test. And like I kind of showed a little bit earlier, just to those of you that have been doing this a long time, I'm sure you can do this in your sleep. And things are coming that are going to get better, right? And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. But we have those additional tabs about campuses and students that team test and teacher test did not have. Obviously, you can check multiple campuses if you have access to check multiple campuses. And then you have to assign which students are going to be taking this test, either by the course they're in, the grade they're in, the teacher they have, or so on. Any questions that need to be addressed here, Eloise, or something that you want to read?
Yes. Are you going to go into the data? Viewing the data?
Yes. Yeah, I'm going to move over to the data in just a second.
Okay.
Any other questions? Anybody out there about anything from the test creation administration side? And yes, I'm fixing to go over to test available from the teacher side, talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to talk about looking at the data and how it shows.
After you review the data, will you also share the archiving and the state of how they can access?
Well, we can talk about that now. I think it's a good time since it's right here.
Okay.
And so, once again, so teacher test. Let me go back there so we can just see that. A teacher test does not have a pending state. You'll see it defaults to active. There's not even a way to make it pending because there's no reason to make it pending. It starts out as active because teachers are always going to just do it whenever they feel it's necessary and ready. It's their own test. But there is an archive button for teachers that, unlike team or campus or district tests where we think I personally think it's a mandatory thing that you would archive at the end of the year, especially at least at the end of the year. Teacher tests are less critical. I still think it's a good practice because we can always copy an archive test. So if you don't want to have to remake it, that's fine. But the data mixes. If you don't archive, the data mixes from year to year. And so teachers only have access to see their own students that they're teaching this year. And so it's less of a critical factor that they archive. But once again, I still think it's always a good practice to get into is to archiving tests. Archiving doesn't do anything to the data at all. The data is still available. It just makes to where we can't change the test anymore and we can't give that particular test anymore. But you could always create a new teacher test and copy that one that you had that was archived, and now you have another test. And the data is differentiated and separated, which is what we want. Same thing goes for campus and district test. After you finish the test, there's kind of two series of thoughts here. Some districts are very, very strict in their test windows. So we're going to have a testing window of this week. We're going to give an additional week for those that are sick and need to do makeups or whatever, and then we're going to archive the test and lock it down. And they do that because they don't want any data changing at all. And so if you lock it down, then whatever you look at where they were will always be the same. Obviously, where are they now depends on your enrollment. However, nobody else can take the test if it's archived, and so I can't go in and make it print out another answer document when it's archived. I can't do that. Now, we may get the question, can you unarchive? If you need to unarchive, then don't archive at all. Don't archive to start with. Just trust. But you can always contact us once again. Before you do anything, before you make any mistakes, I definitely encourage you to contact us, ask us, because we've seen it. We've probably done it ourselves. We've probably been through it. We know the impacts of date range archive, not what should I do or what should I not. And then there's the other end of the thought, which I would say probably the majority of people these days, from what I hear, is we keep the test active for an extended period of time. We get a new student in, we want them to take the test. We can just go in and print an answer document. They can take the test, and now we have it. And we understand that when that new student takes the test, then the overall data for that campus average, the district average on each TEK, on each question, all of that's going to change because we've now added new data to that set. And so it makes sense. And so I say, whatever your district policy is, just be consistent and know the pros and cons of that. But once again, at a minimum, we want you, and we'll talk about this during our end of year procedures for sure. We always do in that webinar or two that we do. We want you to archive for sure at the end of the school year before we start next school year, and we'll go over that. And then obviously you would do that with the mass editor probably instead of having to click every single test like we all used to do back in the day. All right, any other things before I move over to test available? I feel like I'm saying a lot of words.
No, hold on, I'm reading. Is it some are putting in questions and they don't finish and they're coming in between each other? So I'm trying to.
All right. Yeah, just read through them.
Yeah.
We'll kind of go. Eloise will go through your questions and whether she needs to, whether she can respond to them, either typing them, or if it's something that multiple people are typing in, then we can address that verbally. And we won't close the webinar right when we're done, and we'll go back through it. And if we need to answer some specifically, we can, or you can always just contact training if you have multiple questions for sure. All right. So on back to the teacher. And we're just going to really address or look at just quickly at the test available. So when a test is available for a teacher to administer, if they're going to be the ones printing out their answer documents, they're going to be the ones starting an online test, entering answers, whatever method of test administration that you're doing. Test available button is going to be there for teachers if it's assigned to them. And there's 4 different levels, right? We just talked about it. So teacher test is the default level here. If there's a team test that's available, well, there's not any available. My team hasn't made a test active. Yes, I'm a member of that team, right? And there is a team test. So let me go back to my team test. So there's a team test in there, but look, it's pending. And so as long as the test is pending, I can't give it, nor can anybody else on the team give it. It can't be administered because pending means we're still working on it. It's still under construction. We're not ready to give it. But once you're ready to give it, somebody, any member of the team, has to make it active. And once they make it active, then on the test available, that team test is now going to be available for me to give and any other member of the team. And like I said, you're going to click on that test and then click on which class, or classes for that matter, that test needs to be given to. So teacher tests are automatically active, and so if you do have a teacher test, it's going to be here until it's archived, and then it'll no longer be in this list. Team tests, school tests, or school assessments, district assessments, they will only be here if they're active, if they're in the date range, and if they've been assigned to me. Team tests are automatically assigned to me because I'm a member of the team. So onward to school, none are available. One of 3 reasons, and I'm going to say this probably 2 more times. For school and district assessments, there are 3 things that make a test available to a teacher. 1, on the Students tab. So back over here on the Students tab, it has to be assigned either to my course that I teach. So if I teach 5th grade math or Algebra 1 or whatever it is, it would have to be assigned to the course that I am the teacher of record of one of those sections. Or it has to be selected my name, teacher, to be a part of it. If that's not met, then the test will not be available for the teacher. So there's only two assigned methods that make it available to a teacher: either the course that they teach, or I'm selecting them by name. I would venture to say majority of you guys out there probably use selected courses, which is probably because that's what we recommended for you to use. And so that would be the case. It also has to be active. We've already determined that. And it also has to be within this date range. And the date range can be changed later. Obviously, active can be done later. You can always go back to the Students tab and check more checkboxes for the courses or so on as well. But those three criteria have to be met for a campus, school assessment, or a district assessment prior to having these things show up. So a lot of times we'll hear, I can't find my test I'm supposed to give, and it's essentially because they're defaulting to my teacher tests. We had to make it default somewhere. And so it's defaulting to my teacher test, but hopefully they clearly can see up here, oh, I wonder what type of test it is, what level it is, and then I click on that, and then I find that it's available. And once again, if it's not there, then you're going to want to check one of those three things. Either it's not active, it's not in the date range, or it has not been assigned to one of the classes that they teach. Any questions referring to that we've received, that you've at least seen yet, Eloise?
No, sir.
All right. All right, now over to the data. So for a teacher, whether it be campus or district data or whatever, they're going to click on a class or all my students, and you'll see the difference between test types. Right? I don't have any. It doesn't look like I have any teacher test data, but it would say teacher test in there as well. So if there was any teacher test data, it would say teacher test, and I just hadn't done any teacher test. I've built a few, but hadn't collected any data. But there would be a separate little pencil that would say teacher test. The one teacher is the only person that can see that teacher test data for their teacher test. Once again, that's not campus test, that's not team test, that's not district test, but this one teacher, if this one teacher were to give a teacher test, then whatever class or classes that they gave that test to, underneath that class, that section, it would have a separate little item here that would say teacher test, and that's where they would find that data. For a teacher test, that's the only place and the only person. For team test, I can look under my teams. There's not going to be any data here because I built the team, but I didn't do any data, but the test would come out. There's not any team test data, but there's benchmarks that my team members have built. You do not, let me kind of repeat this. You do not have to be a member of the team to see team test data. Team test data is reflected to campus administrators, principals, instructional coaches, counselors, superintendents at district level, directors. I don't have to be a member of the team to see data that have been given in a team test. I would have to be a member of the team if I want to actually view the actual test. I want to go in and look at the questions and whatever. I'd have to be a member of the team. But I do not have to be a member of the team in order to see team test data. It will reflect to me exactly the way a campus or district test does. So I would go to quick views. If you'll remember when we went to the, and I know I'm kind of switching back and forth here, but if you'll remember, well, that's refreshing. When you go and make a test, a team test, when you share it, and I don't, maybe my internet has just died. I don't know, because nothing's moving. When you go and make a test at the top where you say share with team, if you'll remember that when we clicked on that, it asked us which type of test. So it may have been CBA, common assessments, campus benchmarks, whatever. You pick the test type. And so the reason why you're picking that test type is because that's where the data is going to be coming out. So if it's a team test, but the team member, and it's starting to come back here, but the team member, there we go, come on, it's trying. There we go. So on my, let me go back to my teacher test so I can show you that. So if you'll notice that when you share with team, once again, you pick the team, and then you pick which test type, which campus level test type. And it says that for a reason, so I pick that. And if you'll notice on my team one, I picked unit test, and so that's why it says unit checks. But if I would have picked district benchmarks, whatever, then that's the place where the data is going. So on the Analyze tab for my administrators, let's say it was under Common Assessments, even though I'm not a member of the team, if this was a 8th grade science test, right, I could see the data just like anybody else, and I'm not even a member of the team. So you don't have to be a member of the team. You don't have to make your principals a member of every team. You don't have to make your superintendent a member of every team in the district. They can see the team test data. That's kind of the workaround of not giving someone access to make campus test, because we want everybody to see the data. All they got to be is a team test. And so I know we had a question is, can you have we've had a question come in before, can you have a team of one person? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I can be a team of one. I just have to share that test. Don't make it a teacher test. I can build it as a teacher test, but I have to share it to the team prior to administering a test, so that the data is not only reflected to me, but it's also reflected to anybody that has access to see that student's data. And it would be under the test type that I chose as part of that team test creation.
For clarification, though, as a member of the team, I can only see my data.
Correct. That's a great question. So, once again, if you think about team test data exactly the way you think about a district test or a campus test, as a teacher, if I go in and click on a district benchmark, right? I mean, I can click on all my students. I click on a district-wide benchmark. It's given to everybody in the district. Well, I can't see everybody in the district. I can only see the students that I teach currently. That's it. So it would be the same for a team test. That teams do not usurp access level because of who they teach. Once again, they'll only see their students that took that team test. Good question. Good clarification. Any other question?
Nope.
All right. So this is kind of I think it's kind of all the content I kind of wanted to go through. I know there's lots of comments and questions that have been typed in. Like I said, before we end the webinar, we'll make sure that we go through and read those together, and we can always report on them and whatever. But if you guys have any additional questions or need any additional clarification on these topics, you can always just email training@eduforia.net and we can get with you. Let me go back here.
I do have two more questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Does someone with a district data viewer access also see the data from a team test?
Yes, absolutely. Anybody that has access to any student that's on the team. So if I'm a teacher, if I'm a principal of a campus of a team test, obviously if I'm a district level student that had district data viewer, they can see team test. Team test data. The best way to do it is think about it exactly as a campus test. From a data standpoint, for administrators, for campus administrators or district administrators, there's no difference between a campus test and team test on the way that the data is viewed. The way that the data is collected is different because it's a different type of test, but the way that it's viewed, it's the same.
Jason, can you just go back like maybe in 2 minutes and just share again as an administrator what you showed previously, how I can see the data as an administrator for a team test?
Okay. So if I'm an administrator, so when I say administrator, anybody with campus level access or district level access. So anybody that's either a principal level in Aware, or they've been given district data viewer or multiple campuses, they all go to quick views and then they pick a test type. Y'all out there might want to, it may be a good idea. So let me go into the assessments tab. Let's talk about this under configured test types. So let's say it might not be a bad idea. So if you wanted to make sure you knew which was what, right? I could make a test type called team tests, right? Can be used for campus level testing, which is required for team tests. This has to be checked. It is. Can only be used for district level testing. Well, we don't want, this is not a district test. It's a team test. It's a campus team test. And so from then on, whoever builds a team test we want them to choose team test as the test type. So once again, to reiterate that again, when you make a test, a team test from a teacher test, you're going to share with team, and then you're going to pick the type. So here I would pick team test. I mean, we may only make it one thing. I mean, you could go take these other two out to where they can't even choose another one. This has to be it. And if you want to be real specific, and then everybody that is campus level access or above, when they go to the Analyze tab, they go to Quick Views, there's going to be a team test. That's where all my team test data is going to be.
And keep in mind that the test types are created by a district level manager.
Right, test types, yes. Yeah,
Yes.
you have to be a data administrator to manage test types. Absolutely. So answer documents, we have a question about answer documents. So yes, meaning run but printed. If you're printing answer documents, only members of the team can print answer documents. That's correct. It's assigned to them, and so they have to print their own answer documents. That's correct. It's in that way, it's like a teacher test. That is different than the campus test. In a campus test, obviously, if you have some experience, then you could have one person print out all the answer documents for the entire campus if you wanted. But yes, a team test does still rely on the teachers that are part of that team to administer the test. And when I say administer, they're either printing answer documents, they're starting the online test for their classes. They're the ones in charge of the test administration. Good question. Other questions?
They're asking about when the test editor will be. I don't know if you're going to discuss.
So let's talk about that. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I had a discussion with some folks about, about possibly showing a little bit. It would cause so much excitement and questions that we would have to do a whole separate webinar. And so we will be doing other webinars. But I do want you guys to realize or to come by our booth or come by and talk to us. So this is conference season. And this is not all. This is just the next 4 that we have on the list. There's a lot of ESC conferences and stuff coming up as well. But currently, right now, we have a couple people in Florida at a conference. It's a kind of a national conference in Florida going on this week. Starting next week, we'll be at Midwinter. There'll be several of us at Midwinter. So if you're going to be there, feel free and come by, and we will definitely show you some of the new test editor. And then obviously TCEA will be there, have a large booth, and a lot of our company will be there, probably a dozen of us, I bet. And then we have kind of the biggest region conference. 10 and 11 do a joint conference every year, and that's going to be in Arlington on the February 14th. And will be that's a little bit different than these others in that there'll be some mini kind of training sessions at that one, as long as the other Eduphoria conferences at other region centers that'll be coming up later in the spring. And so there's a lot of opportunities to come by and see us, come by and talk to us in person and questions. And we always like to see you guys and hear from you. We'll have some questions for you about and getting some feedback from you guys on the editor and other things that we'll be showing and talking about. And so come by and see us. We already went through a lot of questions. Speaking about the editor, it is moving forward. I know we hadn't shown much of it recently, but we have devoted folks that are building it. And I can tell you personally that, and those of you that know me, I wouldn't tell you something that wasn't true. It is progressing. It is very elegant and simple. All kind of on one place. So we kind of talked about the different tabs and how there's 6 different tabs in the current test editor. That's not going to be the case anymore. It's going to be all kind of in one spot, and you can see everything and do everything at once. Edit a question and whatever. It's all going to be right there. You'll be able to add a question in place, and you can drag and drop questions to reorder them instead of hitting that little blue arrow up 14 times or whatever. There's just so much good that's coming out of our new editor. This is one of those things that, it's always been operational. Those of you that have been using Aware for a long time, it's worked. It's worked well. It's collected data well, but it's been frustrating in some steps. And and we know it. We used it ourselves, and so this is one of those happy things. It's kind of like the mass test editor. That it's just a happy thing. It's not replacing something that was broken necessarily. It's just making something that work much more seamlessly and quicker and faster and just better. And so we're excited about what's coming out of that. It's going to be good. And yes, it is progressing. And we're very cognizant about what time of year that's going to release, because obviously that's going to impact so many users. It's going to be positive, but even a positive thing released at the wrong time of the year would be frustrating for your users. And so, trust me, we know, and we're taking all of those things into account. There's going to be a lot of webinars, a lot of training ahead of time, a lot of visibility ahead of time before we do anything, and we'll release it when it's ready and when it's the best time for everybody involved. Not that there's a great time, but it has to be done at some point, and you're going to like it, and your users are going to like it when it comes out. So we'll do that. All right.
I do have, before we close, I do have 2 questions that needed to be addressed. If a teacher is absent, what are your suggestions for printing answer documents for starting a team test?
Well, if hopefully if you're one of those people that are the Eduphorian, hopefully you have the access to impersonate that person. If they're a member of the team, they're the only person that can create the answer documents for their classes. And so the only option there would be to impersonate that user, going and print the answer documents for them. And if you don't know how to do that, or maybe you don't have access, then hopefully somebody at your district does. Or maybe you're the person that's supposed to do that and you don't even know how. Once again, contact our training team and we can help you with that. Or we can send you to someone that will help with that. Registration for these conferences. If you just want to email training@eduphoria.net, obviously the different conferences, TCEA, we just stop by, but like the Region 10, 11, yeah, there's I'm sure there's a registration for that, and you could probably go to their website, but we could definitely send you a link to that. So if you want to email training@eduphoria.net, we can respond to that with the link to register for those conferences. Absolutely, be glad to. Anything else?
No. Some of the other questions we just have to.
Yeah, we'll hang on. Like I said, we'll hang on and kind of go through some questions and answer them via typing or text if we want. There's a lot of questions in there. So if you've asked one and you don't see a response, or you get off the webinar before you get one or whatever, just please contact our training department directly at training@eduphoria.net with that question, and we'll try to answer it as speedy as possible. Speaking of that, we did talk about these conferences that are going to be upcoming. And so several of these, they're going to be a majority of our training team, if not our entire training team, like TCEA, all of us are there. And so if you aren't there and you submit a ticket to training, we always try to respond as quickly as possible. But if we are all at a conference, we're going to ask for your patience. It's because we just are standing talking to people in person and we can't respond to a ticket. But we always try to be as efficient as we can, but sometimes we can't. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording, and we'll stay on for a little bit and try to answer some questions. But you guys have a great rest of the week, and hopefully we'll see you at an upcoming conference very soon.